There's a moment in every athlete's life when the game becomes bigger than them. At first, it's about proving yourself, about showing the world what you can do, about rising above the odds and silencing the critics. But then, it changes, the spotlight grows brighter, the expectations multiply, and suddenly, every step you take, every word you speak, every decision you make, it matters more, because now you're leading others. That moment came for him not through a press release or an armband, but through presence. Leadership for him wasn't about shouting in the dressing room. It wasn't about being the loudest voice on the pitch. It was in the way he showed up. Every day, every match, every training session. It was in the look he gave teammates when they were slacking. In the intensity he carried into warm-ups. As if even stretching was a part of war. He led by example. Through action, through standard. And when you play beside someone like that, when you watch how they prepare, how they live, how seriously they treat every moment, it changes you. He inspired, not by asking for more, but by being more. You'd see it when his team was 2 goals down, and instead of dropping his head, he'd sprint even harder. Instead of frustration, you saw fire. When others panicked, he stayed composed. He knew how to carry weight. Not just the weight of greatness doesn't always begin with stadiums or silverware. Sometimes it begins on a small island, far from the flashing lights and roaring crowds. Madeira, a place surrounded by the Atlantic, where football isn't a spectacle, it's a simple joy. Streets are narrow, walls are worn. Most days children don't dream of fame, they dream of helping their families, of getting by. Life there is modest, honest, and demanding. And for a young boy born into those conditions, the future isn't promised, it's imagined. He didn't grow up with the luxury of trainers in every color, or pitches lined with perfect grass. He had a ball, he had the street, and he had a hunger. There was no shortcut for him, no golden path, carved out by privilege. What he had were early mornings, late nights, and a family who worked hard, so he could chase something more. His mother did what she could, and his father, working at a local club, gave him his first real connection to the game. Not through tactics or technique, but through environment, through love, through sacrifice. That old pitch near his home wasn't glamorous, but to him it was a theater. Every kick mattered, every run meant something. Even back then you could sense something different. He wasn't just playing, he was training, even before he knew what training meant. Obsessively repeating the same moves, again and again, kicking a ball against a wall with a sort of purpose you don't usually see in a child. He didn't just want to play the game, he wanted to master it. But talent alone isn't enough, especially when you come from limited means. What you need is resilience. And from an early age he had to be resilient. At school, they said he was different, too focused on football, too distant in class, sometimes too emotional. But those weren't flaws, they were signals, signs of someone consumed by a dream bigger than his surroundings. He faced ridicule, he faced doubt, but he also had a mother who believed in him fiercely, a family that sacrificed to give him a chance, and a self-belief that would carry him through storms most children never have to face. At just 12 years old, he left the comfort of his home, of everything he knew, and boarded a flight to mainland Portugal, a boy on his own, chasing a dream that still felt like a whisper. No friends, no familiar faces, just hope and fear. The adjustment was brutal. He cried himself to sleep, missed his home, missed his home, missed his family. There were days he wanted to come back, but something deep inside told him to stay, to keep going, to endure, to prove that he belonged, even if no one else believed it yet. He started running more, training harder, eating better. He studied the game, not in books, but with his feet, his eyes, and his heart. It was in these early days, with hardly anyone watching, that the foundations were laid, not of a star, but of a fighter, of someone who understood that if life doesn't hand you a ladder, you build one with your bare hands. These beginnings, simple, raw, and honest, shaped him into someone who never took anything for granted, someone who understood the value of struggle, of sweat, of tears, quietly wiped away before anyone could see them. Because on that island, where the sea meets the cliffs, a young boy had already decided that his story wouldn't end where it began. There are many players who are gifted. Some are born with speed, some have balance, others have vision, but every once in a while, someone comes along who, above all else, has the will to work harder than everyone around them. And that will, that engine, can't be taught. From a young age, he showed signs of something different, not just in the way he played, but in the way he prepared. While others were satisfied after a training session, he stayed behind, practicing free kicks until the sun dropped behind the rooftops, repeating drills that most considered routine. But for him, they weren't just exercises, they were building blocks. It wasn't just what he did on the pitch that separated him, it was the choices he made off it. While others in his age group were out with friends, or enjoying the lighter side of youth, he was focusing on recovery, nutrition, sleep, long before those things became buzzwords. In modern sport, he treated his body with the kind of respect you'd expect from someone much older, because to him, football wasn't a part of life, it was life. Even early in his career, coaches and teammates were stunned by his intensity. Every sprint was at full speed, every header, every pass, every shot, done with intention. He trained as if every session was a final, as if there were 1,000 people watching, but most days it was just empty stands and echoes, and still he gave everything. They say talent gets you noticed, but it's work that makes you unforgettable. He studied the greats, watched their games, analyzed their movements, but he didn't copy, he absorbed, and then he added his own turn, his own strike, his own rhythm. He was never content with what he had, no matter how good it was. Even at his peak, when the world had already crowned him one of the best, he behaved like someone who had something to prove. That's the mark of the rarest athletes, the ones who train not to win praise, but to chase limits, limits that only exist in their own minds. Behind the scenes, he was relentless, in the gym before anyone else, last to leave the pitch, obsessive with diet, surgical with fitness. While many players naturally decline with age, he seemed to defy time, not through luck, but through discipline. There's a kind of respect you earn when your teammates know they're standing next to someone who has outworked everyone in the room, including them, not by shouting, not by demanding, just by showing up, again and again, with more intensity than the day before. And the beauty of it was, he didn't ask for shortcuts, he didn't want special treatment, he wanted the grind, the early mornings, the sweat, the repetition. He understood something that most young players take years to realize, that hard work doesn't guarantee success, but without it, you've already failed. There's a quiet dignity in routine, waking up each day, and doing what others avoid, going again after disappointment, staying hungry after success, and that's what truly separated him. It wasn't just about running faster, or jumping higher, it was about consistency, day in day out, year after year. He wasn't chasing awards, he was chasing improvement, chasing moments where he could be just 1% better than yesterday. That kind of drive can't be taught in academies or drawn on whiteboards. It comes from within, from a place deep enough that even fatigue can't reach it. Talent is a gift, but mindset, that's a choice. You see it in the eyes of those who truly want it, that unspoken determination, the way they carry themselves when no one's watching, the way they respond when the game turns against them. That's where you start to recognize the difference between someone who's merely good and someone who's destined to be great. For him, that difference was in the way he thought, the way he approached every day, not as a routine, but as an opportunity, not just to perform, but to improve. That mindset, that inner drive, wasn't built overnight. It came from hardship, from competition, from wanting more, not from others, but from himself. There's a mental edge that champions carry, and it often has nothing to do with the final score. It's in how they respond to failure, to criticism, to pressure. When most players would look for excuses, he looked inward. He didn't dwell, he learned. Every missed shot, every poor touch, every setback, it was all filed away, studied, and used as fuel. He didn't just want to be part of the game,
He wanted to control it, and that begins in the mind. There's a reason he always seemed one step ahead. It wasn't luck, it wasn't instinct alone, it was preparation, mental preparation, visualization, focus. He would study defenders, watch their movements, predict their decisions, not because he wanted to outshine them, but because he wanted to outthink them. While others were focused on the moment, he was already planning the next one. His mindset was rooted in discipline, not just in training or nutrition, but in emotion, in composure. He didn't let the occasion consume him, he shaped it. Final minutes, high stakes, massive crowds. Instead of anxiety, he found clarity. While the world held its breath, he found rhythm. That takes more than nerves of steel. That takes years of mental conditioning, years of teaching yourself to be calm in chaos. Confidence is often misunderstood. For him, it wasn't arrogance, it was assurance. A belief built on years of doing the right things. A belief that he had earned the right to trust himself. When he stepped up to take a penalty, it wasn't about the cameras or the pressure. It was about muscle memory, focus, breathing, blocking everything else out, until only the ball and the goal remained. That kind of focus doesn't switch on with the whistle. It's lived, every single day. From the way he tied his boots, to the way he walked into the stadium, every movement had purpose, every action had a reason. Champions have a unique relationship with failure. They don't fear it, they embrace it, they treat it like a teacher, a challenge to respond. And that's exactly what he did. Every loss sharpened him, every stumble taught him something new. He didn't allow his ego to protect him from reality. If there was something to fix, he fixed it. If there was something to improve, he improved it. Quietly, relentlessly. That's the true essence of his mindset. Not the fire that burns when the crowd is cheering, but the fire that burns when no one is around, when the lights are off, when it's just him, his thoughts, and the responsibility he carries, not just to win, but to honor the process. He carried a mental toughness that couldn't be shaken by headlines, critics, or even setbacks, because his belief wasn't based on hype. It was built from the ground up, through repetition, through patience, through moments where giving up might have been easier, but never even crossed his mind. To stay at the top for that long, to constantly demand more from yourself, to never let comfort creep in, that takes more than physical strength. That takes a mindset forged in silence, in solitude, in struggle, that most will never see. Greatness often comes with a cost, and rarely is it visible on the outside. It's easy to admire what someone has achieved, the trophies, the titles, the accolades, but behind those moments are years of decisions that weren't easy to make, moments that most will never understand. The life of a champion is defined not just by what they win, but by what they're willing to give up along the way. He was just a boy when he left home, 12 years old, too young to carry the weight of what was ahead, and yet already old enough to understand what he had to do. He left the warm comfort of his island, the familiar faces of his family, the sound of his mother's voice, and the safety of home-cooked meals. He left the streets he knew, the language he spoke, and stepped into a world that didn't stop to comfort the ambitious. That decision, to leave it all behind, wasn't glamorous. It was lonely. At an age when most children are still figuring out who they are, he had to find the strength to be alone. No friends to lean on, no parent to hug. After a long day, just a dorm room, a new city, and a ball at his feet. He missed birthdays, holidays, quiet evenings around the table. He missed the feeling of being a child, because almost overnight, he had to become something more: focused, resilient, independent. The world wasn't going to wait for him to grow up slowly, so he learned quickly, learned to channel pain into performance, learned that dreams come with distance, distance from comfort, from distraction, from the ordinary. The sacrifices didn't stop with childhood. As he rose through the ranks, the demands only increased. While other players enjoyed the high life, the late nights, the parties, the attention, he kept his world small, focused, controlled, not because he was told to, but because he knew what it would take. Every decision had to serve the bigger goal. Meals were measured, recovery routines weren't skipped, vacations were cut short, there was no margin for error. His body became his responsibility, and his career became his obsession. Even relationships, the personal ones, were impacted. Being close to someone who's chasing perfection isn't easy. It requires understanding, patience, and space. He missed moments with his family, missed moments with his children, not out of neglect, but because he carried the pressure of being more than just a player. He had to be an example, a standard, and maintaining that meant constant choices, constant control, and perhaps the greatest sacrifice of all, the loss of normality. For most, life is allowed to be quiet at times, ordinary, simple, but for him, there was no off switch, no privacy. Every move, every word, every misstep, scrutinized. Even joy became something to manage. Celebration had to be calculated, because with every win came expectation, and with every goal, a new bar was set. But he never complained, never asked for sympathy, because deep down, he understood that this was part of it, that greatness isn't just a path, it's a toll road, and the price is paid in private, long before the public sees the success. What most people saw was the glory, but what they didn't see were the nights spent in hotel rooms, instead of with family, the training sessions, while others were on holiday, the tears that were wiped away behind closed doors, the quiet moments, where the weight of it all could have broken him, but didn't. It's one thing to reach the top, it's another to stay there, and to stay there, you can't just hold on to what you have. You have to keep reaching, keep searching, not because someone else is chasing you, but because you've set a pace so high, the only person left to outrun is yourself. From the very beginning, he was never satisfied, never comfortable with what he'd done. The goal was never to simply be better than others, it was to be better than who he was the day before. That's the difference. That's what drives those who never plateau. It's easy to stop pushing once you've won, to ease up, even just slightly, when you've proved your worth. But that was never part of its mindset. Even after the trophies, the records, the global admiration, he kept going, kept evolving, kept searching for areas to refine. In training, it wasn't just about maintaining, he wanted to break new levels. If his sprint time could be faster, he worked on it. If his shooting accuracy dropped by a fraction, he addressed it. If he noticed a new movement in a younger forward, he studied it, adapted, practiced. He wasn't competing against age, he was competing against stagnation, and he knew that growth wasn't just physical. As the years passed, the game changed, opponents changed, his own body changed, and instead of resisting that change, he embraced it. He didn't try to be the same player at 35 that he was at 20. He became smarter, more efficient. He repositioned himself. He reimagined his role. He let go of ego and made room for evolution. That adaptability, that willingness to evolve, is one of the most underrated qualities in any athlete. It's what separates the momentary stars from the timeless ones. He understood that greatness isn't just about peaking, it's about longevity, and longevity requires reinvention. What made it more remarkable was how quietly he did it. There were no headlines about the adjustments, no interviews about the personal tweaks he made week after week, but they were there. In the way he changed his diet again, to suit more performance data, in the way he introduced new recovery methods, in the way he brought in experts, studied analytics, and approached his career like a business built on discipline. And when the spotlight shifted to younger names, to fresher faces, he never reacted with envy, he responded with work. When people questioned if he still had the hunger, he didn't reply with words, he replied with performance. That pursuit of growth wasn't always loud, it wasn't flashy, sometimes it was subtle, sometimes it was unseen, but it was relentless. Even during injury layoffs, he used the time to improve mentally, to study the game, to reflect, to understand how he could return, not just healed, but sharper. The gym sessions, the diet changes, the mental preparation, the tactical evolution. They weren't for praise. They were part of a promise he made to himself long ago, to never become complacent, to never allow comfort to replace ambition, because to him, progress wasn't a phase, it was a lifestyle, and maybe that's what people miss. But behind every goal he scored, every record he broke, there was a man who was never done learning, never done adjusting, never done trying to become a better version of who he was yesterday, because for some, success is a destination, but for him, it was always just another step towards something more refined, more disciplined, more complete. Leadership isn't always about shouting in the dressing room or wearing the armband.
Sometimes, the most powerful kind of leadership is the kind that doesn't need to be announced. It's in how you carry yourself, how you train, how you prepare, how you hold the standard when nobody's watching. That's the kind of leadership he brought to every pitch, every club, and every team he was part of. He wasn't always the loudest in the room, but his presence always spoke louder than any words. From the moment he stepped onto the training ground, there was a different energy. You could feel it. Teammates knew it. Coaches saw it. There was something in the way he moved, sharp, focused, locked in, that reminded everyone around him, this is what it looks like to be serious about your craft. It's easy to tell people what to do. It's harder to show them what doing it actually looks like. He led by doing, by outworking, outlasting, outdisciplining everyone around him. When others were tired, he pushed harder. When training ended, he stayed. When games got difficult, he leaned in, not for applause, not for praise, but because that was the level he held himself to. That sort of behavior has a ripple effect. Young players would watch him, not just in matches, but in the little things, the recovery sessions, the gym routines, the meal choices, and they learned more from watching him than from anything they'd read in a playbook. He was a walking blueprint for what professionalism looked like at the highest level, and he never needed to demand respect, because everything he did earned it. There's a discipline in leading by action, because it means you can't have off days, you can't say one thing and do another, and he lived that responsibility. If he asked for 100%, it was because he gave 110%. If he encouraged teammates to take care of their bodies, it was because he was already leading the way, quietly, consistently. He didn't shy away from pressure either. In fact, he stepped into it, not just for himself, but for others. When the stakes were high, when the margin for error was gone, he wanted the ball, not for the glory, but to take the weight off his team's shoulders. That's what leaders do. They absorb the pressure so others can breathe, and it wasn't always in dramatic moments. Sometimes it was in how he reacted after a missed opportunity, never with blame, never with finger pointing, just a glance, a nod, a word of encouragement, and then straight back to work. It taught teammates that mistakes weren't the problem, giving up was. He also held people accountable, not with anger but with expectation. He raised the level of those around him, simply by being there, because once you share a pitch with someone who never cuts corners, who never slacks off, it becomes impossible to justify doing anything less yourself. His dedication became contagious. You saw it in how his teams trained, how they prepared, how they believed. Even in the dressing room, he wasn't trying to be the center of attention, but when he did speak, people listened, not because of volume, but because of credibility. Because when someone has lived every word they say, it carries more weight than anything rehearsed or forced. It takes maturity to lead that way, patience, control. He could have chosen to make it about him. He could have demanded the spotlight, but instead he let his habits do the speaking. He let his efforts set the tone. He knew that in football, and in life, real leadership is earned in the spaces where nobody's clapping, where the only thing guiding you is the standard you've promised yourself. Never to lower criticism is part of greatness. It's inevitable. The higher you rise, the louder the voices become, not all of them cheering. In fact, sometimes the silence of admiration is drowned out by the noise of doubt, but the truly great don't run from that noise. They learn to live in it,
to operate through it, and eventually to rise above it. From an early stage in his career, the spotlight was unforgiving. Everything he did, how he celebrated, how he spoke, how he played, was dissected. Some said he was too confident, some said he was too flashy, others questioned if he had the discipline to become more than a highlight reel, but he never allowed those opinions to define him. He was aware of the headlines, the analysis, the opinions. You can't ignore it completely, but instead of allowing the criticism to weaken him, he used it, turned it into energy, into drive, into something productive. It was never about proving others wrong. It was about proving himself right, about fulfilling a promise he made, not to the world, but to the kid who once trained in the streets with holes in his shoes and dreams too big for most to understand. Resilience isn't about pretending that negativity doesn't affect you. It's about acknowledging it, processing it, and choosing to keep going regardless. When people questioned his attitude, he responded with performance. When they criticized his style, he sharpened it. When they doubted his maturity, he focused on his growth. That's what separates the mentally strong. They don't waste time trying to change every mind. They put that energy into becoming so consistent, so effective, that eventually even the critics run out of things to say. But it wasn't just media scrutiny, it was whistles from rival fans, pressure from massive transfer expectations, and moments when even his own supporters turned on him, because that's what happens when you play at the highest level, year after year. Support is conditional for most, but his resolve never was. Even after delivering match-winning performances, he was never fully shielded from doubt. People expected perfection every time, and when that didn't happen, the reactions were often swift, sometimes harsh, but he didn't spiral, he didn't crumble. He absorbed the weight, and moved forward. Quietly, determinedly. There were moments, of course, when frustration showed. That's only human, but those moments never defined him. What defined him was how he responded after, how he trained harder, focused sharper, cut the noise by sharpening his game to such a degree that his football became the only thing left to talk about. Criticism also came from within the game, from former players, from pundits, from those who believed he was too focused on image, on brand, on the external, but they missed the part where he was always the first to arrive at training, and the last to leave. They missed the part where his off-field focus never distracted from his on-field execution. He taught younger players how to carry themselves under pressure, not by talking about it but by showing them, by handling constant judgment with grace, by continuing to deliver, by letting results speak louder than interviews or statements ever could. And perhaps most impressively, he never stopped evolving, despite the noise. That's the true strength, not just resilience in standing firm, but in staying fluid, changing when needed, adjusting, not out of fear, but out of understanding that you can take in all the noise around you, and still move with clarity, still know who you are, still move with purpose. Because in football, as in life, there's always going to be someone waiting to criticize what they don't understand, but the ones who rise above are the ones who've learned to listen without losing themselves, who've mastered the art of taking hits without letting them stick, who show up every day with something to prove, not out of insecurity, but out of pride in the work, the journey, and the standard they refuse to let slip. Legacy isn't just what you achieve, it's what you leave behind. It's what continues to grow in places you've never been, in lives you've never met, in moments that happen long after you've stepped off the pitch. For him, football was always the stage, but the message, the real message, was much bigger than the game itself. His journey became more than a personal success story. It became a source of motivation for millions, for kids growing up in small towns without much money, for young players told they weren't good enough, for families watching someone chase the impossible and make it feel within reach. His career wasn't just a collection of goals and trophies, it became a symbol, a reminder that with relentless discipline, belief and effort, you can create something remarkable out of very little. People often look at the mansions, the cars, the spotlight, but they miss what he truly built. A standard, an example, a mindset. That's what lasts. That's what matters most. Not everyone can play like him, but anyone can work like him. Anyone can learn from his focus, his commitment, his refusal to settle. That's where the real legacy lives, in the way people change how they think about dedication because of what they've seen him do. And beyond the pitch, he used his voice carefully, but powerfully. He stood up for his family, spoke about values, shared glimpses of his life, not to boast, but to offer something real, something others could connect with. Whether it was returning to his roots, supporting causes, or simply reminding the world of where he started, it all added layers to who he was. He never forgot the journey, never forgot the people who helped him rise, and by doing that he reminded others to stay grounded, even when they fly. His training videos, his fitness routines, his moments with fans, they all built something that extends far past a football career. He became a global icon, not just because of how he played, but because of how he carried himself. The discipline, the standards, the rituals, the mindset of constant growth. He showed the world what consistency really looks like, and that kind of example has a way of living on long after the final whistle blows.